Listen, if you can hear me, I need help. I'm trapped. I don't know what happened, but...
Hello? Oh, thank God. Hey, excuse me. Listen, I need help. Something happened and I don't know. I think there's a malfunction or something. Anyway, the door won't open and I'm stuck in here. I need to get out to check the explosion. Listen, don't worry. I just need you to let me out. There's an override to the door in the hallway you're in. Can you see it? No, the other way. No, like the track off to the right. Turn around.
Hello? Hey, friend, can you...
Hey, man, you're a lifesaver.
Alright, so I need to get down to life support and check out that explosion. I don't know what it was or why no one's responding, but if life support goes out, we're pretty much screwed. Do you mind helping me out? I know it's not why you're here, but if we lose life support, we lose power, and once we're out of auxiliary power, we lose oxygen, and, well, you know how space works. Anyway, it's just a few levels down, so let's get... Oh, shit. This is bad. We need to... What the fuck was that?
Auxiliary power restored. Life support critical.
Hi, thanks for watching. I'm going to break down how I put the audio together for this level, starting with the dialogue and scripting system, then moving on to ambiences, objects, and cutscene audio and some mixing stuff. So the most important, challenging part of this level is the scripted dialogue. It has to keep flowing naturally, react to gameplay triggers, and often sync to or cause other gameplay triggers. Because the dialogue is interactive, I split the script into segments that would, if uninterrupted, continue playing each line until the end of the segment. So let's run through the script real quick. This is the script right here that controls the logic for the dialogue. It also does a lot of the gameplay scripting and everything using events in the dialogue itself. So basically what it does, I have all the dialogue segmented out into these data tables right here. This makes it really easy to edit everything in Excel or Google Sheets or something. Super easy to just batch edit everything. What it does basically is grab the row, the correct row for the table for whatever line you're trying to play. It grabs all the important stuff, all the different variables, breaks it out into which sound effect it is, what the subtitles are, if there's an event, a delay if you want to space the lines a little bit more, and who's speaking it, where it's coming from, that kind of thing. After the delay, it'll update the subtitles for every speaker. It'll tell it to play, and if it's a loudspeaker, it'll use a different function to cause it to play because the loudspeakers have a delay baked into them. And then it'll play every subsequent line using the on-line finished. It just uses a little delegate on the first speaker if there are multiple bind event to on audio finished. So when the line is done, it'll do all the same stuff and keep going until either it's interrupted by something else or it reaches the end of the segment and there's nothing else to play. So these loudspeakers are pretty cool. It's basically just a blueprint so I can place them wherever that has a function in it that lets me set a sound to play after a delay, and then I can change that delay on each instance of the blueprint. This one is 0, this one right over here is 0.2, and by doing that I can just have them all play the sound and they'll be kind of staggered so you get that kind of loudspeaker delay effect like you're in a big arena or something. In this case it's a small environment, but I wanted to exaggerate it, so instead of using a distance-based thing I just kind of set numbers on each one so you would hear it staggered no matter what. So I'm pretty proud of how the ambience turned out for this area. It feels pretty alive and varied between rooms and all that stuff, and all it really is, there's a few different components of it. There's a static stereo loop that doesn't really do anything other than just make the sound of air moving in a real space kind of set a bed for everything else that's happening. And then when the power goes out, it goes out with it to kind of enhance the deadness of the space station as it's kind of being damaged and stuff. The other things that are happening, there are some spot sounds around, which are for the most part pretty simple. There's like some air conditioners here and here. There's this little computer thing. So this is just like the looping sound of a hard drive. This is a sound cue that is basically just a random container. So if I open it up, it's basically just a whole bunch of different little beep sounds that kind of just play randomly forever. Kind of like that. Pretty quiet, pretty subtle, but especially when it's running through reverb, it makes a difference. And then this one over here is actually pretty cool. It's basically the same idea where it's just a looping random container, but it has random delays between 3 different layers. And so multiple things can be happening at the same time, all mixed together through the one sound cue, and they're all happening randomly. And sometimes there's a bunch of things happening at once, sometimes there's only one thing happening at once. But the effect is basically just these creaks and moans that are unpredictable. You won't ever hear it loop because there's a whole bunch of different variations that can possibly happen, and they're kind of, you know, it's not one after the other. They're kind of staggered. Sometimes there's 3, sometimes there's nothing. And the advantage of doing it this way instead of just baking it into a stereo ambience like I would do in a 2D game is that I can place it somewhere in the environment and have it run through reverb and all that stuff. But more importantly, I can have it sound like it's coming from, say, down the hallway. In this case, it's one of these over here. There's a whole bunch of, don't worry about those. And it makes it sound like all the damaged things are happening in the environment in a direction, and it kind of encourages you to imagine more of a real physical space than if it was just kind of happening flatly all around you all the time. And one of the most important things of getting all these objects right is first of all getting the reverb right, but then also getting these attenuation settings right. And so, you know, there's not exactly a right or wrong answer, but it's a hard to balance thing of, you know, making sure you can hear things in the environment, but also making sure they don't clutter. They're in the background. They're not super important most of the time. One of the things that helps that out is this focus thing. I think it's new in the new audio mixer features in Unreal. But basically what it does, it's kind of like cone attenuation, where if you're facing something, if you're focusing on something, it'll be louder, or you can change the settings on it. And if you're looking away, you can make it attenuate more. It's pretty flexible in what you can do with it. But what I did with it was to make the attenuation scaling just a little bit more exaggerated. So if you're looking away from something, it's playing as if it's farther from you. Which basically means that I can turn everything up just a little bit more, maybe a couple decibels more than I normally would have, and have them be audible and clear when you're paying attention to them. And then when you look away, they don't clutter the mix anything all, you know, so you don't have everything going all the time. You just kind of duck what isn't important at the time. So you just put that on every object and it sounds pretty good. You can have a little bit more fun with it. There's also, you know, the reverb send is nice, you know, have things go farther into the reverb when they're farther away, so they're more distant, they're more part of the room and less present. The other thing is the reverb. The reverb is really nice. It's a good sounding reverb, but more importantly, it puts all these spot objects more into the room, because the reverb itself is 2D. It's not spatialized at all. It's basically just bussing everything together and then putting a 2D reverb on it. It kind of makes all the frequencies that are happening in the spot sounds become part of this static 2D ambience. So it kind of just makes that ambience feel different. There's a different frequency profile. So when you go from this room with these objects and then go into this room with these objects, that kind of rumbly air movement sound just feels different. And that's a really important part of making, avoiding ear fatigue, if you want to have that ambience be present in the mix, and also just making spaces feel more varied and alive, because they look very similar right now. I'm not a good level designer, but they feel a little bit different just because there's different sounds happening all around you. Even if I only have, for instance, like one spot sound in this room and only, you know, 2 or 3 in this one. So the sequencer is kind of nice. The level sequencer is kind of like a keyframe editor. It looks a lot like a video editor or something. It's useful to help sync up audio files, but I haven't actually found it useful to play audio files unless you wanted to like screen grab the cutscene itself and then just bake everything in 2D. Maybe it would be useful for that. But as of right now, in just the vanilla unedited editor, these sounds can only play basically through the level sequencer itself. You can't tell them to come from locations in the room. You can't attach them to emitters or anything. So the way I did it, because I wanted the sounds to move around the room during the cutscene, I basically just posted events that go to the blueprint for the level that tell those things out in the environment to start playing their sound and kind of hope it lines up. I put these in here, these audio files, just to help sync everything up, just so I can see visually that it is lining up. And then I also used these tracks down here to automate the transforms on the audio emitters for the ones that needed to move around, which is, you know, one way to do it, but not the best way. If I could just have them playing through this and, you know, tell them to come from an emitter instead of from the level sequencer, that would help a lot. And it's probably extendable. There's probably a way to make that happen if I wanted to actually use this in production. But at the end of the day, it works. That creature sequence at the end, that's all this. That totally works fine. So I can't complain too much.